Hello everybody, I have some thoughts about Iron Lung and what is happening in the movie. I want to preface this by saying I don't really watch Markiplier. I did watch Unus Annus, but he was only a third of that, so I'd also never heard of the game before going to watch the movie, so I went in pretty much completely blind, and these are my theories about what was going on with Simon in the movie. Of course, massive spoilers ahead. Let's go. So first, there's two ways of looking at this. You can take the unreliable narrator way and try to find a logical reason for everything. This more than slightly ignores the whole eldritch horror aspect of the film, but I think it's good to bring up. And then you can of course look into the cosmic horror and connect the dots there. So let's start with the slightly boring way of looking at it, logically. Simon begins the movie in an unknown mental state, but seeing the flashbacks, he does seem to have some sort of PTSD-like thing going on, so he's not the most stable person. Throughout the movie, he sustains injuries that can at least partially explain the things he, and we, see and experience. From being banged around in the sub, we can likely assume he has a concussion, which can lead to things like having a headache, confusion, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, blurred vision, memory loss, and fatigue. I think especially memory loss, dizziness, and confusion are important here. The blurred vision is pretty much confirmed, as the camera often blurs in a way to suggest that Simon is also experiencing the world in this way. Simon is also dehydrated, which, while probably not as serious as the concussion, would absolutely exacerbate his fatigue and dizziness. He may also have decompression sickness and other types of pressure issues due to going down and up quite fast in the beginning. This can also cause dizziness and fatigue, as well as numbness. We don't really see anything indicating numbness, but along with confusion, it could lead to feeling disconnected from your body, and it could play into Simon's hallucinations with what is happening to his body near the end of the movie. From his injuries, he may also be suffering from blood loss, ironically. Just like with everything else, blood loss can lead to dizziness, fatigue, confusion, and weakness. So far, everything leads to Simon simply having absolutely no clue what is really going on. And since we're presumably seeing what he's experiencing, these things could be the cause of some of the issues. There are two other things that I believe would be the more major injuries though. At one point, Simon drinks alcohol meant to clean wounds. This type of alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, should never be ingested, as it is absolutely poisonous. And then we come to the absolutely most prominent reason for Simon's behavior. He has acute radiation sickness. We see a shot of the manual that says that the camera should be used carefully as it will irradiate the people inside. Simon doesn't notice this, and quite often uses the camera as a light. If he didn't die in the sub, he would absolutely die very soon thereafter from the radiation damage he suffered. Radiation sickness can cause nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headache, fever, and dizziness. And after a while, it would also cause you to bleed quite a lot. And there is a scene where Simon does cough up blood. It's pretty safe to say that, in a logical view, this movie portrays a man's last few days hallucinating while dying from many injuries. In the other view of the movie, it of course also portrays that, but there's more to it. So let's get into the eldritch side of things. There are a lot of different things to discuss here. Unlike with the logical explanation, we cannot just use one thing to explain away everything we see. So let's start with the monster. Unsure what to call it, so I'll just call it a worm, since it seems to resemble some sort of larva or worm. I believe that there are several worms living in the ocean of blood, and they're previous humans. This theory is actually what made me want to make this video. When Simon is hearing the recordings from the SM8, we can hear someone either throwing up or choking, and others telling that person, "We told you not to drink it." This person has been ingesting the blood. In my eyes, this was the first person to become the worm in the SM8. Based on some scenes near the end of the movie, it also seems quite possible that the blood worm virus doesn't really discriminate between distinct individuals or even objects close to them. While Simon doesn't ingest the blood as such, it definitely infects him. Early on, a drop of it lands on his hand, he wipes it away, but more and more blood floods into the sub as the movie progresses. When the glass of the SM13 cracks, it sprays into his eyes. Later, a drop lands on his forehead and burns him. I believe the first proper sign of the infection is telepathy. I theorize that the worms communicate through some sort of telepathy, and when Simon thinks he's picking up on the SM8 survivors on the radio, this is actually just his infection having spread enough to allow the SM8 worm that's following him to try to communicate. I don't know if the worms would know that they're worms, as the first bit of communication seems quite earnest from the worm's side, with a reaction that makes sense from people who just recently would have been hoping on rescuing communication via radio. However, as time moves on, the minds in the worm grow very insistent on seeing light, so it seems very possible that the worm does realize that it is indeed a worm, and is simply trying to get Simon to do as they want. Another sign of the infection is what we see on Simon's arms after he removed the bandages near the end of the movie. The little bumps and holes in the skin. It almost looks like some sort of acid is slowly eating through him. Looping back to the blood worm virus not knowing or caring about separating different individuals or even things, the blood also infects the SM-13. Not just by filling it with, blood, but also covering it in these growths and making it breathe to keep Simon alive. After the infection has progressed to a certain point, the oxygen level goes up. The iron lung is doing what the machine was named after did, breathing for its user. When Simon is struggling with the black box, the submarine moves unexpectedly and he grabs onto a wall, and the wall grabs him back. The infection of the sub and the infection of Simon is one and the same, and now they're even more physically connected through arm and wall. The struggle for individuality from his vehicle costs Simon his arm, but the virus doesn't mind. The worms being humans also explains their humanoid heads, and in a weird way makes the blood being human blood make a lot more sense. There's more here than just the blood being a virus, such as time glitches. Simon sees himself twice. Once, there is someone moving in the back of the sub, which is him from another time. And once he is in the back and sees a one-armed creature sitting in the front, slowly turning to look back towards him. This is Simon seeing himself after he ripped his arm off from the iron lung. Maybe this is something to do with the quiet rapture? If space got messed up, could time also have gotten messed up? Then we have the whole thing with the god looking through a pinhole, the white light, and the deal Simon makes with it. I'll be honest, the details of this went by way too fast for me, and I'd need to watch the movie again to form a decent theory around it. But hey, cosmic horror is typically unexplainable horror, right? My one idea right now has to do with the back end of a black hole. You know the sci-fi theory of how black holes may connect different universes like a weird, impossibly dense tunnel? In the world of Iron Lung, maybe you've got some event happening in another universe with a black hole that connects to the Iron Lung universe. Something happens on one end and causes the quiet rapture on the other end. Maybe the white light is the light that got sucked into the black hole in the other universe? I doubt any of this actually makes any sense when it comes to physics, but we can bend those things for a good story, especially one containing some sort of powerful blood being. Last of all, some thoughts on the ending. Simon was forced into a situation where he had to sacrifice everything, but in the end, it was his decision to fight for humanity. He could easily have laid down and thought, fuck him. What would it matter to him anyway? He knew he was dead the moment he unwrapped his bandages. But he didn't. He pushed and literally tore himself apart in order to try to get the potentially important information contained in the black box to the last few humans out there. Despite everything they did to him, they condemned him to the iron lung after all. The scene of the black box, safely floating cradled in Simon's life vest, cradled in his life vest, his chance at survival, was so impactful. It made me think about how, while not having to sacrifice his arm and life for it, Mark has shown indie filmmakers and aspiring film producers that it is possible. It is possible to do it without the backing of a major studio. You don't need Hollywood. You can do it yourself, and you can do it well, and you can have your work be shown on cinemas throughout the world. You can go toe-to-toe with Hollywood and win. Most of us don't have the resources or experience that Mark has, of course. But now we know it can be done. And if you try hard enough, it can absolutely be done. This movie was incredibly inspiring for me, and from what I've seen, for many others as well. Not only because it's a well-written and well-produced movie, but because it shattered a glass ceiling. It showed that we don't only have to eat whatever slop Hollywood's investors decided looked algorithmically pleasing today. We don't need Hollywood. Anyway, these are my thoughts coming out from the movie. I probably missed a bunch of really obvious things, and presumably the game has more explanations. But these are the thoughts of someone going in completely blind and without a proper connection to anything that's got to do with the movie. I hope you're doing great, and please let me know your thoughts.